Good evening, everyone. Severe Weather Team 9 meteorologist Nathan Schott joining you for this edition of Nate at 8. We're going to be tracking the potential for another stray pop-up shower and thunderstorm for Friday, but tonight overall just begins a much drier pattern as we do look ahead going into next week. It's a drier, but it certainly is going to be a hot and humid pattern that we're going to have in place as well. Now, we will be tracking not only some dry conditions tonight, but much more comfortable conditions. So we're getting back to, thanks to a drop in the humidity, a decrease in wind speeds, a decrease in cloud cover tonight. This will likely allow our temperatures to fall back into the 50s. So we are getting back to more cool, comfortable nights. Certainly going to be looking forward to that and certainly want to take advantage of it because unfortunately what we have in place with that hot, humid stretch next week, that equals some warm and muggy nights. So what we have arriving for tonight is the most comfortable night for the foreseeable future, as we're going to be tracking those temperatures ramping right back up into the weekend. And again, it is dry tonight, but we have the potential for a pop-up shower and thunderstorm Friday, primarily going into the afternoon. So that's when we're going to be watching more for the second half of Friday for that pop-up shower and thunderstorm. It does stay very isolated. The potential's there that we're even dry across the area. It's not a guarantee, but that slight chance does exist for additional isolated shower and thunderstorm on Friday. I think we even drop that chance off then for the weekend. And at that point, again, it is a hot and humid stretch. A pleasant evening right now across the Ohio Valley, getting some smiles there when it comes to that comfort index. These dew points are falling into the 50s. And again, this is where we're going to stay into tomorrow morning. So much more pleasant feel to the air has returned across the Ohio Valley. And that will carry over again going into Friday. Unfortunately, this drop in humidity is short-lived. As you'll notice, the dew points are climbing right back up for the weekend. I think it's still more tolerable for Friday. It's not overly humid, but it does start to turn muggy on us on Saturday. And by Sunday, well, we're back to exactly what we had for not only yesterday, for a lot of this past week. Unbearably humid. It's unbearably humid again by Sunday, and that is just going to carry over for most of next week. Just unbearably humid conditions. So now's the time we take advantage of not only some dry conditions, or mainly dry conditions the next couple of days, but at least that lower humidity, because by the time it ramps up Sunday and carries over to next week, it really is not going to be the best conditions to be outdoors. And if you are, you got to be safe with it, because it's just going to be hot and unbearably humid, and to the point where this heat is excessive by Sunday, and it'll carry over for a lot of next week. So, good opportunity to get some yard work done over the next couple of days before, again, it just starts to turn even more dangerous Sunday going into early next week. You certainly want to be taking breaks, staying hydrated, take breaks in the shade, air conditioning, because it's just unfortunately not good conditions for outdoor, especially outdoor work by Sunday. That'll carry over into much of next week. Thanks, Nathan. Much better sound and weather coming. A lot of better weather coming, Lola. That is for sure coming our way. Certainly nice to see. No, it's not good to see the hot and unbearably humid conditions, but it's certainly nice to see that lack of rain for a lot of the next week. Good evening there, Austin. Crazy, messy day today, Austin says. Rain and thunder off and on all day today. Counted about 3 times it rained, Austin says. Is Sunday through Tuesday looks miserable. I hope everyone stays safe during the hot part of next week. And yeah, it's just not pleasant. It certainly is not pleasant weather to be enjoying the outdoors, and maybe to be sitting in the pool, lake, whatever way to cool off. Maybe the good weather for that, but certainly not good weather in general to be enjoying the outdoors, that's for sure. So we did have some of those lingering showers and thunderstorms like Austin was mentioning for today. We had a couple severe thunderstorm warnings as well make their way through our area earlier in the afternoon, but now this evening we are drying up across the area, and we're not going to be tracking and likely any more precipitation tonight and until we get into tomorrow for maybe a stray pop-up developing into Friday afternoon. Joe, good evening to you. Thanks for tuning in on this Thursday evening. So radar is looking quiet across the area. And as we jump into future casts, again, we're going to be tracking some quiet conditions into Friday. One thing to watch for, we can have some areas of fog developing for Friday morning's commute. Outside of that, just really enjoying the more cool, comfortable night. That's for sure. Areas of fog will give way to sunshine to start off the day Friday. It'll mix with more clouds than in the afternoon. This is when we'll see more cloud cover. And again, the potential, just like what Futurecast is showing, for that straight pop-up into the afternoon hours showers, quickly leaving though by the evening. It's a narrow window of time tomorrow in the afternoon where we have that potential to deal with that pop-up shower thunderstorm, quickly tapering off, and then we are dry Friday night and likely not going to see that pop-up return for the weekend. We will likely stay dry Saturday as well as into Sunday, and we'll see those overnight lows, well, back in the 70s, those highs back in the 90s, and just no break from that heat once it picks up for this weekend. There's just no relief. So these overnight hours, it's warm and muggy. Those days, hot and humid. It's just one of those times where even at night, there's really just not too much relief from the heat. It is one of those situations where it can be dangerous. And when we're dealing with this prolonged heat arriving for the weekend, that'll carry over into next week. Renee says it's cool outside and breezy. Pleasant evening, isn't it? It's nice. A break from the warm, muggy conditions that we've had as of recent. After this past week, bring the heat. Won't complain, Dave says. And certainly nice to see these dry conditions. Yes, it's going to be hot, but boy, it's certainly nice to see a much drier stretch of weather coming our way. And you'll notice that precipitation threat, well, there's no high threat for rain here likely over the next week. We can, just like for tomorrow, by the middle to latter part of next week, start to see that potential for that pop-up shower and thunderstorm into the afternoon hours. But there is just no widespread rain threat likely here over the next week. So certainly good to see. I do think rain chances can further pick up late next week, but here near term, this is a much drier pattern that is going to be in place. And this all has to do with a change in our upper air pattern. And what we're going to be watching is a feature that we call a ridge in the upper air pattern. And that's what you see currently building across the eastern U.S. into the weekend, even amplifies a bit then going into early next week. And this ridge just remains in place. And as it does, again, it keeps those temperatures hot and it keeps us dry. We can see this ridge then start to break down some, as you see there, into Wednesday, and that can carry over into Thursday. So notice that weakening over the eastern part of the U.S. And as that does, we can then start to see temperatures trend a little cooler, and we can start to see those rain chances pick up a bit as that ridge starts to break down. But it's certainly amplifying into early next week, so that allows temperatures to ramp up as well and likely keeps us dry with plenty of sunshine, little cloud cover during this stretch. But again, it's just going to be a hot stretch of weather and likely a humid stretch of weather as well. Again, just unbearably humid for a lot of this stretch starting this weekend, especially Sunday, and then continuing, I think, for most of next week. So there's our high temperature trend the next 10 days. Again, not overly hot for tomorrow. It's a pleasant day. By Saturday, it turns very warm. We're nearing that 90-degree mark. Not really humid yet Saturday, but by Sunday is when it's unbearably humid and it's hot. When you factor in that humidity, of course, it's going to feel even warmer during this stretch. And we have good potential to deal with 5 days straight of highs 90 plus. Possibly, if we can hit 90 Saturday and we can hit 90 again next Friday, then a whole week there, 7 days straight of highs 90 plus. And there is that potential. And I think the more even another a more noteworthy aspect are these overnight lows. So, these afternoons are obviously going to be very hot, right? Especially when we're climbing towards the mid 90s into early next week. But these overnight lows can be 70 plus for a week straight. We can see 70 plus lows arrive by this weekend and continue all the way towards the end of next week. And if we get that week-long stretch of those low temperatures, 70 plus, that would be the longest stretch since 2016. So yes, these are certainly something that we're keeping an eye on, is just how hot these afternoons are. But on the flip side of it as well, we don't want to undermine just how warm it's going to be overnight. And that is what makes this heat dangerous, is the fact that even at night, there's just not much relief. The lowest these temperatures are going to go for a lot of this stretch are in the lower 70s. That's the coolest point of the entire day. And it remains unbearably humid for the entirety of that, from morning, into the afternoon. So it's just one of these stretches of hot weather coming our way where when you don't get much relief from that heat at night, it does become dangerous. It does become dangerous. So, this is now the time as we see these temperatures ramp up this weekend and we see this hot stretch of weather into early next week. Check up on, your friends, family, your neighbors, especially those that are elderly. check up on your loved ones going throughout this stretch. As again, this heat can be dangerous when these temperatures are ramping up to the extent. And obviously, you want to practice your heat safety. Obviously, if you're outdoors in this, you want to be taking breaks from this heat, staying hydrated. Don't push yourself in this heat over a lot of the next 10 days, as a lot of this stretch is just going to be excessively hot. And again, it's going to feel even warmer when we factor in the high humidity, because at that point it's likely feeling closer to 100 Sunday, into the 100s Monday and Tuesday, close to 100 on Wednesday. So when we factor in the unbearably humid conditions, it can feel like it's into the 100s, close to it Sunday, likely there Monday, Tuesday, and close to it again on Wednesday. So again, just not a good stretch of weather, unfortunately, for the outdoors as we do look ahead. On Saturday, it's already feeling like it's close to 90, but certainly that heat gets more excessive by Sunday. That'll carry over through the middle of next week, is that heat index really ramping up. And that heat index is just, again, when we factor in the heat and the humidity, it makes it feel even warmer to us. And the reasoning of that, when we're dealing with a lot more of that, those higher dew points and more moisture present in our atmosphere, that the sweat that our body's producing does not evaporate as much. When that occurs, well, we get sweaty, right? And but because that sweat is not evaporating off our skin, we lose the body's natural way to cool ourselves. So that's how we cool ourselves. That's our body's natural response to hot temperatures. It produces that sweat. And when that sweat evaporates, we get a process called evaporative cooling that actually cools us. But of course, when the sweat's not evaporating and we just get sweaty, well, we're not cooling ourselves down and it feels even hotter to us. And that's where the heat index comes into play. So that's why we say, it can feel hotter than it actually is. And that's the science behind it. That's why it feels hotter than it actually is when we're dealing with that high humidity in addition to hot temperatures. And it can feel like it's into the 100s as we do extend, especially Monday and Tuesday. That's likely the worst of this heat wave coming our way, as we'll deal with those highs into the 90s, further into the 90s. And again, that those unbearably humid conditions with dew points mid to lower 70s. Just unfortunately not good weather in that regard. But again, certainly good to see that during this stretch, we are not getting much rain, if any, for a lot of this stretch over the next week. So certainly good in that regard. But still, we want to be, keeping in mind that this excessive heat that is coming our way, especially into early next week. Continued prayers for Ohio County. Indeed, Renee, continued prayers for those impacted in Ohio County. And certainly that is the good thing, that we are not, again, tracking much rain here over the next week. So we will certainly take that. But we still, want to be mindful of just how hot it's going to get, and still want to be, checking up on our friends, neighbors, loved ones when this heat really ramps up this weekend. What a high heat roller coaster ride indeed, Austin. These temperatures ramping up. Not looking forward to Monday through Wednesday. And again, that Monday, Tuesday is likely even the worst of it in terms of just how hot it's going to be. That's when we'll see temperatures towards the mid 90s. That's likely our couple of warmest days. And when it's just very humid, it can feel like it's into the 100s. Getting to enjoy the great outdoors hasn't been in the cards lately. The rain or excessive heat makes me sad. Hopefully everyone takes precautions. Yes, hopefully, again, practice those heat safety tips. Stay hydrated. Take breaks in that heat. Don't push yourself out in that heat by this weekend and continuing into much of next week. And these temperatures ramp up really right, and ironically, with the beginning of summer. So another side note, summer does begin tomorrow, June 20th. That's our summer solstice. It will actually occur tomorrow at 10:42. So summer will officially kick off, but it's late tomorrow at 10:42 p.m. That's the official beginning of summer for astronomical summer. The summer solstice marks the beginning of summer, and that occurs on June 20th tomorrow on Friday at 10:42 p.m. So summer kicks off and Mother Nature ramps up those temperatures for the beginning of summer. That is for sure. So we jump into your 9+1 day forecast. And to sum up again what we have coming our way, that potential for that stray shower and thunderstorm for the latter part of Friday. And again, I think we lose that risk then going into the weekend, and a lot of sunshine will break out for the weekend, continuing into early next week. And when we can see that potential for that pop-up shower and thunderstorm returning is likely more for the middle to latter part of next week. And I think rain chances can further pick up. Cloud cover can further pick up later next week. And as we see that ridge break down, and that will also then coincide with temperature starting to drop. But I do think that it's still just just rather muggy. Maybe a little drop in those dew points into the following weekend. But I think just once we see the humidity pick back up this weekend, I just don't think there's much relief at all in sight here over the next 10 days. Hopefully, we can get some into that following weekend. But for the next work week, it's just unbearably humid, likely for the entirety stretch of that through Monday through at least Friday. Maybe we can start to see at least a little drop in that humidity for the following weekend. But that's why I certainly say, now's the time. Tomorrow is still mostly dry, right? Still got to keep in mind that potential for that pop up in the afternoon, but nothing that's going to, I would say, stray away from any outdoor activities for tomorrow. Certainly not. It's going to be, fairly pleasant tomorrow, not really humid, not really hot. And now's the time to take advantage here, not only for Friday, but even into Saturday. I know Saturday it's going to start to turn hot on us. It's muggy. It can feel closer to 90, still not ideal, but certainly the next 2 days is going to be much better to get that yard work done with respect to what we have coming our way Sunday and continuing for much of next week. And again, at that point, if you have to do the yard work, take breaks, right? Don't push yourself, stay hydrated, and take breaks in the shade at least, but certainly air conditioning is even better. Just any way you can to cool off when those temperatures are that hot with that high humidity going into next week. So yes, thankfully it is dry, but we don't want to take the heat lightly either. Certainly want to be safe with it as we do look ahead here over the next week. But certainly good to see a lot more sun icons and a lot less rain icons. That's for sure. Certainly going to be enjoying this much drier weather ahead for us here over a lot of the next week. Again, I think we can start to deal with more showers and thunderstorms late next week, but I don't think, certainly it's not a whole lot of rain. I don't think of those that we're dealing with a lot of rain throughout the day and to Wednesday and Thursday. It's likely just more of that potential for some developing into the afternoon. So we'll be watching for that. But certainly overall, again, much drier with respect to what we had going throughout this week. So we lose, thankfully, that potential there, with this much drier pattern. Thankfully, we get to have some relief and not have to worry about, more severe weather and flooding concerns, just more dealing with that excessive heat concern here near term into next week. Thanks so much for joining me for this edition of Nate at 8. You can catch me coming up News 9 at 10 on Fox 9, News 9 tonight at 11 for the latest. And as always, you can join me right back here for Friday evening's edition of Nate at 8 as we'll further break down that hot and humid stretch coming our way and continue to take a look at when we could see those chances for some showers and thunderstorms return later next week. I'll have the latest on that coming up with your next edition of Nate at 8. Until then, have a good night. I'll see you on the next edition of Nate at 8.